Denafrips is a manufacturer of audio electronics primarily known for its series of advanced ladder DACs. In this test, I cover the Terminator 15th DAC, which is positioned as Denafrips' flagship, but at a price of $6,099, it's affordable compared to some of the other flagship DACs I've been covering. Let's see how it performs.
Hi, my name is Martin Bell. I'm the founder and CEO of Java Hi-Fi. We're an amplifier manufacturer from New Zealand. Well, I think we wanted to do something different. We wanted to use some new technologies. We wanted to have some new industrial design. I came up with the name Java Hi-Fi because I am a real coffee aficionado, and of course Java is slang for coffee, and hence that has carried through to the naming of the single shot and the double shot. It was 4 letters. We were able to make a cool kind of waveform logo out of the name. And I'd like to think perhaps that I'm something like a conductor of an orchestra. I'm not necessarily the engineer or the designer, but I can work with great people in those fields to bring a product to life.
First, a brief note, esteemed viewers. At the Absolute Sound, we approach reviewing equipment somewhat differently than other channels and publications. Our goal is to provide an objective, observational description of how audio equipment sounds so that you can decide if further investigation is merited. To do this, we use a reference, the Absolute Sound, which is the sound of real instruments in real spaces. We observe that on this measure, all components have strengths and weaknesses, so we ask you to process our observations with your musical concerns and your ancillary equipment in mind. Generally, our main point isn't whether we like or dislike something, because we're not you. Your music is not our music, your system is not our system, and your budget is not our budget. And our main point isn't whether the technology is amazing, although, frankly, this can be interesting. There's more on this, much more, in our methodology article. The Denafrips Terminator 15th is a balanced 26-bit R2R DAC when used with PCM. We've had good experience with other balanced R2R DACs, so we look forward to this one. With the right input, it can handle up to 32-bit, 768 kHz PCM inputs. As well, the Terminator 15th has a 6-bit DSD architecture. With DSD, the maximum data stream is PCM 1024. These should allow for some future-proofing. The Terminator 15th is priced at $6,099 delivered to the U.S. The new and perhaps volatile import duties are the responsibility of the customer, though Denafrips says they expect these will remain moderate. All right, let's do an overview. I've been testing a variety of digital to analog converters in the under $50,000 range. I know that's a big number, and so I've covered products from under $1,000 up to that exalted $50,000 level. Although, for exaltation reference, DACs go above $200K as of 2025. The point of our surveys like this is to be able to talk competently about what you get and don't get at various price levels, and hopefully to guide you to some interesting products. Anyway, why spend money when you don't have to? And similarly, saving money while reducing desired performance might be a false economy. I found the Denafrips Terminator 15th to be a very good DAC, certainly the best I've tested below $10,000. Its special sonic qualities are a deep soundstage with lively dynamics. If those terms seem like marketing BS, please check the Audiopedia article on the physics of musical reproduction on our website to understand how these qualities are fundamental and you understand them more than you may think. You definitely gain some sonic capabilities by stepping up from standard chip-based DACs to the Terminator. And similarly, you can get somewhat better performance on certain sonic parameters than the Terminator offers, but so far in my testing, the price increase is substantial to get that. So, the Terminator 15th is an exceptional value if its strengths align with your needs. More on that shortly. All right, let's start with what is the issue with DACs? Why do we want to talk about high-end DACs at all? An important reminder, or maybe new information, is that significant sonic factors in music reproduction often involve the 7 major issues of audio believability. The problem of amusical digital distortions is one of those 7 major problems, and so it's the focus of our DAC series, which this review is part of. Because DAC distortions are difficult engineering issues, they tend to get less attention than amplifier circuit and speaker refinements. But these digital issues are probably more important for making progress toward believability at this stage in the evolution of audio technology, which is why we've drawn attention to them. We also use a conceptual system to help understand why DAC distortions are in the upper left quadrant of our map of issue importance. These issues are subtle in an unusual sense. They're only triggered by certain signals. But when these distortions occur, they're fundamental distractions away from believability, if you know what real instruments sound like. Unusual and unnatural sounds are distractions because they focus attention on the distortion and away from the music. An example of a special digital distortion is something called aliasing difference errors. High-frequency sounds can generate an artifact called an alias, which is a tone not present in the original music that is created when the sampling frequency is lower than that needed to capture the musical signal. Filtering is used to reduce these artifacts, but certain nonlinearities in the process can lead remaining very high-frequency alias signals to be subtracted from one another and generate tones shifted down into the upper mid-range, like 3 to 4 kilohertz, where they're easily heard. There are more such unnatural digital distortions. I'm not an expert on digital processing, and I'm not trying to turn you into one. I'm simply trying to point out that some of the myriad ways that musical digital processing is not just ones and zeros. To put this in musical terms, many recordings heard today on digital have easily heard distortions if you're familiar with the sound of real instruments. Perhaps my favorite example of this are the sounds of cymbals. A cymbal strike isn't quite a perfect impulse, but its transient nature yields signals at very high frequencies. It's possible that these are above the frequency or near the frequency manageable by the sampling rate, and thus are subject to special digital distortions, as previously mentioned. It doesn't take long to find transients that on a lot of digital playback equipment sound odd or unnatural. And it isn't just with cymbals, but also with voice and piano and wind instruments. You can become desensitized to these if you only listen to digital and never to live music or vinyl. But my experience is that you know something is wrong regardless. Now, let's get to the real issue, which is sound quality, and specifically the sound quality of the Denafrips Terminator 15th. All right, first I'm going to start with overall balance. Normally, I don't find frequency balance to be a big differentiator between DACs, but with the Terminator, I did, which is why we listen and observe. The Terminator places a slight but noticeable emphasis on treble transients and thus seems to have a slightly rising treble output as the music extends from the upper mid-range into the treble. This is a small but meaningful effect. I'm not here to tell you your preferences. See our methodology, first principles, in the description for more. I'm here to explain what products do. But I will say that many audiophiles say they're fighting an ongoing battle with treble brightness and harshness. The apparent treble balance of the Terminator would thus not seem to be ideal for these listeners, but I think you'd be wise to consider the other virtues of this DAC before drawing such a conclusion. And, as I'll detail in a moment, low distortion DACs like this one have much more pleasing treble than what many audiophiles are fighting. All right, next, let's talk about treble transient unpacking. If you followed my technical mini treatise, you'll know that DAC treble distortion is often an issue. When DACs do treble distortion well, or lack treble distortion, we get something called treble transient unpacking. What is treble transient unpacking? Well, let's start with a distortion you often hear with digital playback. On cymbals, for example, you'll often hear something that sounds like a crash, even though you doubt that the cymbal is of that type or has been struck with big force. If you listen carefully, you'll notice that even these crashes don't sound right. They come across as more like a burst of noise than a big cymbal hit. It sounds to me as if all the transients of the strike got jumbled in time, leading to something less like real instrumental output and more like unnatural noise. The Denafrips Terminator unpacks what was previously noise. It becomes a transient followed by ringing and shimmer, the sound of the cymbal. The transient isn't overspiked, the decay is spread out like the real thing. The transient is often followed by noticeable tones and waves of tones and different types of tones, not by grit, undifferentiated except by level. Now, to put this in context, the Terminator is not the best I've heard at treble transient unpacking, but thus far in my tests you have to pay more, perhaps substantially more, to get slightly better results. Note that these results came using the Terminator with very good streamers. Streaming makes surprising and obvious differences in DAC sound quality. All right, next let's talk about soundstage width and soundstage depth. Sound staging with the Terminator is excellent. The exceptional quality here is the depth of images, which extend farther toward the wall behind the speakers than on all but the DACs at 5 times or greater price that I've tried. This excellent depth is accompanied by natural performer placement that helps get the image off the speakers. And, sorry to say, I have to note that the high-end streamers I used enhanced this phenomenon. Then, let's talk about transient response. Another feature of the Terminator is that it has a generally quick and lively sound. The leading edge of notes is very well rendered, but it doesn't sound edgy or brittle or distorted. With reference to the absolute sound, it seems more natural and real, and I was surprised and impressed. But, I admit, some may not like this level of excitement in certain types of music. Then we move on to tonal density. The Terminator has tonal density that's good, but not equal to the DACs at much higher prices. This is in the domain we can call continuousness, which is simply the positive aspect of a lack of grain. My notes suggest that the Terminator frequently has a slightly, I emphasize slightly, noticeable grain structure. However, I think if you're coming from a lower price DAC, you're likely to view the Terminator as better than acceptable here and a real step forward. Then we have organicness. My final parameter for DAC evaluation can be called organicness. There's a lot of research in A to D and D to A conversion suggesting that timing errors, and not just jitter but also interpolation errors, are a factor in perceived sound quality. I've spent some time listening to time-corrected versus standard conversion techniques in an effort to explain what work on this dimension sounds like. I've landed on the term organicness mainly to indicate that time-managed digital signals and digital conversions sound more natural and relaxed and whole, yielding detail without edginess. Add to that the equally important idea that instruments sound right, not processed. If your reference is the absolute sound, and you have experience with real instruments, you can notice this right away. It's a bit hard to separate this quality from tonal balance that I discussed at first, but I think many listeners will find the Terminator to be natural and relaxed sounding, although certainly not dull. I think the Terminator is better at organicness than many other DACs. If the treble balance isn't a matching problem with the rest of your system, I think a charming aspect of the Terminator is that the sound quality elements are coherent, meaning they hang together in a way that isn't distracting. In fact, the big soundstage, clarity, and dynamism are highly involving and encourage continued exploration of your library. Now, I want to add a subjective coda. Some viewers have struggled with all of this objective, somewhat analytical detail. Admittedly, to make sense of this, you'll want to have some experience with real music and some experience with what it means to have or not have certain characteristics. I think those are good things to study. Still, I can see that some people want something additional related to my feelings about this DAC. Okay, here you go. With the caveat that this is necessarily subjective, I'll say that I like the Denafrips Terminator 15th quite a bit. I very much enjoy a detailed and open presentation because it's involving and insightful, and for me, this one is low distortion. Consider the new recording of the Mozart Symphony No. 41 with Ensemble Appassionato under Mathieu Herzog. It shows much of what I've been talking about, and I found the results thrilling. The dynamics are brilliantly punchy, the violins sound super clear, although a bit grainy, and the soundstage is wonderful. At this price point, the Terminator seems amazingly involving and alive. And I like that. All right, the other piece we need to talk about a little bit is design. You should know that Denafrips have a long list of features embedded in the Terminator. First of all, ladder DACs are hard to do well, with impressively high precision required. Using a balanced design makes this, roughly, twice as hard. There are many other details like shielded linear power supply, special clocks, and high-quality components. I don't mean to give this short shrift, but most of us have a limited ability to reason from a bevy of features to sound quality. That said, I do want to note the correlation so far in my testing between good ladder designs and reduction of typical DAC distortions. This isn't to say that all ladder DACs do this, but so far the Denafrips, the MSB, and the Title have this feature in common and also do very well on this particular issue. Other non-ladder designs can succeed here too, but it seems to require special design talent and therefore it's more rare. Other details that some will be concerned with include a switch on the Terminator to enable non-oversampling mode. Another thing is that the Denafrips also allows for USB and AES and I2S inputs. The I2S input will be of interest to some given the theories about its superiority. Of course, I2S isn't standardized, so this is a bit of a challenge. I have 2 new streamers coming, one under development by Denafrips, that feature I2S outputs, so I hope to test this soon. All right, let's summarize. The Denafrips Terminator 15th is an excellent DAC. It has a sound competitive with very high-end DACs, but without the full high-end price. It sounds different from other excellent DACs in the next price range up, but that difference is sometimes to the advantage of the Terminator. I think these differences will be appealing to a group of listeners who want a sense of maximum transparency to the source. This is an exciting DAC. I hope you've enjoyed this review of the Denafrips Terminator 15th DAC. We invite you to revisit the channel soon, and I want to say thanks for watching.